Good overnight, and welcome again to the overnight edition of Untitled Chapter. Our bell back in his cold, luster glory in all 25 times up. So, without further ado, the mail.
From the high desert and the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be in the world's time zones. I'm Art Bell, and this is Midnight in the Desert. All right, it's going to be a different kind of night tonight, although we have a guest coming on that's going to knock your socks off. I know he does mine. Joseph Mcmonicle is here tonight, and he really is the nation's premier, and I mean premier, remote viewer. It's going to be a fascinating night, I guarantee. Rules of the show are simple: no bad language, and only one call per show. That's it. 2 rules: no bad language, 1 call per show. People thank quite a few. Telos for the great sound. It is amazing sound. Joe Talbot at Telos, thank you. Keith Rowland, my webmaster. He'll be up next for a reason that I'll explain in a moment. My producer, Heather Wade. All of you, the Bell Gap people, the Bell Gap inhabitants. People love our bell and the Midnight in Desert sites. Stream guys who get it to you, lv.net, who gets it to them. Our sales guy, Peter Eberhardt. If you want to advertise, he's your guy, Peter Eberhardt. And boy, do your commercials get heard. But first, tonight, we are going to do something that needs to be done. Well, we've already done something that needs to be done. People screamed at us, "Oh, get us an RSS feed." I didn't even know what an RSS feed was. I still am a little foggy on the subject. If you own an Apple product, it's really easy. If you own an Android product, it's still pretty easy. What it does, it's one application sits on your phone or your iPad or something or another, and my shows just show up on it. And by the way, they're 1 hour each now instead of in 3 parts. Already converted the ones in there too. But the whole RSS thing is really hard to explain. So I am bringing my webmaster, my old friend of 5,000 years, Keith Rowland, on the air to tell you what we have done and how to get involved with it. Keith?
Hello there. Good evening.
Welcome to the program.
Here I am. First time for me.
It is a first time. All right. So we have this going, right?
We do. We rushed it together here over the weekend and have this thing up and running. We hope it's going to last and work and continue, but just beware. We're kind of testing on the fly, which is what we do around here.
I feel the same way about myself.
Yeah, let's just put it out there and see where it breaks.
I mean, that'll keep going.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Tell them what we've got.
Okay. Well, the 20-second precursor to what we have is RSS stands for Really Simple Syndication. At least that's what it did when it first started. It's changed. Back in 1999, thereabouts, or a little bit earlier than that, this was a protocol that allowed you to kind of get a list every day of what's new on a website. So you could have a news reader or some kind of a reading program. Boom, get all the headlines and pick what you want to read without having to go through the website all on your own. So essentially, content was pushed down to you, to your program. And so every day you could get those listings and so on. And then shortly afterwards, a man named Dave Weiner took on a task that Adam Curry asked for. And everybody should know Adam Curry, maybe, way back from MTV or VH1 days. Anyway,
right.
He wanted to be able to have his podcast audio file attached to these RSS feeds. So instead of it just being news stories and blog posts, you could actually send down a link to an audio file. So Dave added on what's called MP3 enclosures. You can attach things to it. So now this functionality of adding an MP3 audio enclosure to this RSS feed is now what podcast players use to get the listing of files to download, get the listing of the daily updates and what's new, and download it to your podcast player. And so once you sign up or subscribe, they call it subscribing to an RSS feed, Not to be confused with subscribing to the Time Travelers, but it's sort of kind of thing you sign up for it.
If you're a time traveler, you already are entitled to the RSS feed, right?
That's correct. The
Okay.
RSS feed link will only be available on the archive page of the Time Traveler section of the website. So if you're already logging in, you already get the list of files that you've been looking at already. There's now a link at the top of that page called I wrote that down over here. RSS feed link for podcast players.
Okay, what do you do with that link?
Well, depending on which particular application or a phone that you have.
Let's do one at a time. Keith, say I'm an Apple guy, which I am, and I want to have this newfangled thing. I go to artbell.com, and then I go where and do what?
Well, you're going to get over to eventually you're going to get over to the Dark Matter Digital Network Archive Time Traveler area. So
Okay.
everybody that wants this already knows kind of how to do that. They're already signed up. They go there every day.
All right, they want to do this with Safari, right?
Right. On the iOS devices, the Safari browser is the easiest one. So if you're using Chrome, it doesn't quite work this way. So initially, you only have to do this one time to get started, and then it's automatic after that. So again, it's inside the archived area under the Time Traveler area. This is not free for everybody. It's just another way of getting the files much easier than we had previously working. So you go to your Safari browser, you go to the page, you log in, and you go to the archive page with all the Midnight in the Desert files at. And at the top of that page, there is a link there. And so you will click on that link, and it will then go off to another server that we had to put up together this weekend. So it's going to ask you for your username and password again. And this again, we just have to do this one time. And then once it does that, Safari will then go and launch the podcast player inside your iPhone or iPad, the Apple podcast player, and it will pass along to it the name of that podcast that you wanted to subscribe to.
All right, brief little thing. After you've clicked on the link, put in your password and everything, it may or may not automatically launch your podcast player. So if it doesn't, just go to your podcast player after you put your password in, and it'll be alive.
Correct, but it should launch it because it's got to pass that URL. If not, you just right-click that URL and you can put it in there manually in the podcast player too. But we're hoping that this will just jump right over there automatically, which would be kind of cool. And then when the podcast player runs and it says, okay, I'm going to go subscribe to Midnight in the Desert RSS feed, it's going to ask you for your username and password again.
And you're going to be saying bad words by then.
Yep. But again, this is only the one time you have to do that.
Okay.
So then once you entered in, it'll say, do you want to subscribe? Yes. What's your username, password? Okay. Then give it about 5-10 seconds, because now it's going off and going to grab a list of all the files that are in the RSS feed. So
All the shows that we've done.
the shows, right?
Yes.
It's gonna go back to the website. It's gonna get a list of the shows. It's gonna download it into your iPhone, iPad, and it'll give you a new entry for a new RSS subscription, podcast subscription on the left-hand column, and then it will start listing the individual episodes in the right-hand column. And usually by default, the first time you put in a new podcast that you want to listen to, it'll go ahead and download the first episode. So that may happen automatically. Now, if you've used this podcast player on your iPhone, iPad for other things in the past, this is just going to add to the list. It's just going to put it in the list at the top or the bottom of your list, I forget which it is, and it'll just add it to what you already have, and whatever your settings are, the same settings will apply. Because you can do things like, how many episodes do you want to list? How many episodes do you want to automatically download? How often do you want to check for new episodes? A lot of little tweakers you can do. I'll leave that to the user to figure out.
It is
their best way.
incredibly cool. I know it sounds kind of complicated when Keith talks about it, but it's not. And once you've done it, it is so cool. It is so cool. Trust me on this. All right. Now, if you're not an Apple user, that was good for all the Apple people.
Yep.
Next comes Android.
Yes, Android. Since Android has a variety of browsers, has a variety of podcast players, they don't really have a default one. So if you're browsing around in Chrome and you find a link and you click it, it's just not going to automatically go to some Android podcast player. You get to pick which one you would like. We have one that we've tested that we think is the best one to start with. You might like something better later.
So you're about to get the name of an app to use with Android. Listen carefully. It is
Called Beyond Pod.
Beyond Pod. So if they go to their toy store or whatever they call it,
In the Play Store.
Androidville,
Yep.
They'll be able to find that easily, and it's free, right?
Yes. So there's only some podcast players allow you to put in username passwords, and some don't. Remember, podcasts used to be free for years and years. It's only been in the last few years that we started getting these paid podcasts that take usernames and passwords. So there's tons of podcast apps out there that won't work because they're just not equipped to deal with username passwords. So you got to get one that does that. This is one of the ones that does that.
And again, the name?
Beyond Pod.
Beyond Pod. Okay, great. Now, once you get it,
up later on in the website to have all these links. So.
Nevertheless, once you get that, what do?
Well, you're going to download that app and install it, and then you're going to go to whatever browser you were using to surf our web currently. Again, logging in, go to the archive page where you list all of our shows. You got that link at the top again. Same one, RSS feed link for podcast players. And this time, instead of clicking on it, you're going to want to copy that link to go back to the podcast app and put it in there. So I think you touch and hold the link, and then you'll get an option to copy the link, and then you can then switch over to the Beyond Pod application, and then go into adding a new subscription, adding a new podcast. Then it will ask you, well, what's the URL? You're going to paste this link into it, and then it should take off like everything else. It'll go and access it. It'll ask you for a username and password. You should download it, give you a list of files, and you're off and running.
I've never been to copy and paste school.
I know, on a phone it's a lot trickier than on a computer. There's no right click. You notice that?
Right, so you hold your finger down.
I know.
Okay, all right, so that gets it going then on Android. Anything else?
Even on a regular computer, iTunes supports this. You can just go into your iTunes, and one of the menu options is subscribe to podcast. Click on that, you just paste in that same URL, and it'll join and ask you for the password, and off and running on your Mac, or even I think iTunes on Windows.
All right. Well, we had hundreds of people begging for this, so here it is, and we have somebody we should thank publicly, I think, on the air, and that is Keith.
Mr. Sam Bosell.
Sam Bosell from Belgap.
Yep. He started this as his own little personal project, and we got wind of it, and we hooked up and decided to make it official. And so we got him to move his stuff over to our servers, and we spent the weekend working out all the little details so that we could launch this thing today.
Working your butts off, really.
I'm sorry?
Working your butts off, really.
Well, it was a long day, that's for sure.
All right, so that's how you do it for Apple. That's how you do it for Android. And once you've done it, let me tell you, folks, you'll be happy as a clam, Keith. It was wonderful having you on the air. We almost never hear you on the air, so it's great having you.
I'll go crawl back behind the desk now.
Well, thank you for being my webmaster all these years.
Yes, it's turned out to be over 20. So you keep asking, but I think somewhere in the
I really didn't want an I didn't want an answer, Keith. But
okay, sorry.
Over 20. All right. All right, you got it. Thank you, buddy.
All right, see you later.
That's it, folks. That's how you do it. Joe Mcmonicle is coming up next. Oh, what a program I've got for you tonight. This is going to be good stuff. Radio Gold. Don't go anywhere.
I said no one can take your place.
The clock strikes 12, and Midnight in the Desert is pounding packets your way on the Dark Matter Digital Network. To call the show, please direct your finger digits to dial 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952. Call Arts.
All right, what a treat you're in for. Joe Mcmonicle is currently a full-time research associate and partner with the Laboratories for Fundamental Research, Cognitive Sciences Laboratory, Palo Alto, California, where he has provided consulting support to research and development in remote viewing for 21 years. As a consultant to both SRI International and Science Applications International Corporation, Inc., 84 to 95, he's participated in protocol design, statistical information collection, R&D evaluations, as well as hundreds of remote viewing trials in support of experimental research and active intelligence operations for what is now known as Project Stargate. He is well versed with developmental theory, methods of application, current training technologies for remote viewing, as currently applied under strict full member of the Parapsychological Association with a career spanning 38 years, rather. He has provided professional support to, get this, the Secret Service, CIA, NSA, DEA, FBI, Defense Intelligence Agency, United States Customs, National Security Council, most major command within the Department of Defense. 20 of those years have been within paranormal operations as viewer number, get this, 001 and 372. Joe Mcmonicle, welcome to the program.
Hi, Art. How are you this evening?
Oh, I'm really well, thank you, and really happy to be talking to you because this is truly fascinating stuff. Now, there are many remote viewers in the land, and for years I did interview one who predicted, extremely catastrophic things and that have not yet, thankfully, occurred. And and he also promised that he was going to find gold. This is what really irritates me. Find gold and bring it to me. The gold never showed. The catastrophes never happened. I know you're in a completely different category, Joe, so I just wanted to say that.
I appreciate that, Art. Thank you.
So I guess I want to start by knowing, because this really does interest me. How long have you been a remote viewer? And when I ask who you work for, you're gonna rattle off all those 3-letter agencies, but go right ahead.
Okay. I've been doing remote viewing now for a little over 37 years, not
Wow.
quite 38 years. And I won't re-mention those same acronyms. I'll save the people listening. But some of the things you left out was the Secret Service. Of course, you did cover the labs, and I've also done remote viewing for major television networks in 7 different countries, and dozens of sheriff, state, city police forces, private detective agencies, a multitude of major corporations, and of course hundreds of private citizens.
I can't resist. You say you worked with the NSA.
Right.
And the Secret Service. Now, I have had some dealings with the Secret Service because every time somebody predicts that a president will get assassinated, 2 Secret Service guys come to see me. And I've noted that these guys absolutely have no sense of humor whatsoever. Is it that way with the NSA? You know, other agencies?
Well, maybe. It depends on what the subject matter is. In terms of the Secret Service, their primary job, their only job, is of course protecting the President of the United States. So they take even the most ridiculous threat very, very seriously. And that's why they come and see you, and that's why they will continue to come and see you probably whenever somebody makes that kind of a statement or something on the air.
I won't let it be said anymore, Joe, for that exact reason. I mean, they come and they sit on the couch, and I say, you know, it's a little old lady in Missouri. She didn't mean it, really. We don't even know who she is. And, you know, then I'll say something funny. They don't even crack a smile.
No, because it's not. It seriously is. It's not a funny issue with them.
Right.
They get literally hundreds of threats, I'm sure, on an annual basis, and they have to check every single one of them out, because if they don't check one of them out and it turns out to be real, then it's a serious situation. So
Trust me, they're so serious, Joe, that I feel like throwing my hands up and saying, "Hands up, don't shoot."
It's almost as serious with the FBI. The FBI also takes their responsibilities very serious, because they of course are required to protect us against terrorism within the United States, and of course we're not going to be subject to most of the stuff going on outside the United States, which
Right.
is the CIA. So the FBI takes it very crapshoot when you start thinking about, are you for or against what the NSA does. The NSA really is attempting to protect the American citizens, but there's a lot of things that they do where they can see the justification for it. No one else can. So,
how do you feel about that?
Early.
Yeah, how do you feel about that?
Well, I personally don't have anything to hide in my phone conversations, and I've always assumed that my phones are public property, that people can tap my phones anytime they want, and that sort of thing.
And probably
I'm a ham operator as well, so.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, so talking over the air is you just assume that there are a lot of people listening to what you're saying. It's the same thing with the phone. I'm not gonna, if I'm gonna do something that's very private, I'm certainly not gonna use a phone for it. That sort of thing. So
you worked with just about every humorless agency there is. I'm wondering, how did they find you, Joe? How did they come? I'm sure in every case they came to you, right?
Yeah. What happened is when they first decided they were going to pursue this idea of remote viewing, it initially was supposed to be a study project that was going to last approximately 3 years, and they were going to find and recruit counterintelligence people and that sort of thing, and teach us to be remote viewers if they couldn't find somebody that could remote view. And then the way they did that was kind of strange, because they knew if they brought us into a room and said, everybody who thinks they're psychic, raise your hand, we'd all just stand there and stare at each other. So they were able, though, they went through the records, and they found people who basically were exceptional in the jobs that they really shouldn't have been exceptional in, and decided that they were either extremely lucky in most cases, or were probably psychic to some degree. And once they identified those people, I being one of them, they brought us in and asked for volunteers to be tested.
Do you know how they actually got onto you? I mean, was there a website that said Psychic Mcmonicle or something? How did they get to you?
They actually talked to my bosses, and most of my bosses said, yeah, he's a little strange. He seems to know the answer when a lot of people don't. So what they did is they called me in, and they laid a lot of psychic stuff on a table in front of me and asked me if I thought any of that stuff was real. And I told them that I needed to review it before I could make an astute comment on it. And so they gave me a couple hours to look over a lot of the material, at the end of which I said that I felt that a lot of it was bogus, but some of it seemed to be serious enough that it could pose a threat. And if it could pose a threat, then it needed to be investigated. And they thought that was a straightforward answer, so I got recruited.
Can you talk about the kind of stuff that they were asking you to evaluate?
Yeah, it's a mix of things. A lot of it was classified material that had been collected during the Cold War from the Soviet Union and China and other places. Much of it was classified, and mixed in with that were all kinds of newspaper articles, magazine articles, things that were not classified. Much of that was pretty much garbage. So they had a true mixture from the bottom of the pile to the top, and I would say maybe 15% of it was truly research, and the rest was just bogus storytelling or mythology. After saying all the right answers, I had an interview with Dr. Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ, Stanford Research Institute. And as a result of that interview, they requested that the Army send me out to be tested. And so I went out and did a series of 6 remote viewings. And my remote viewings turned out to be, I had a p-value of .003, which was the best that they had
Okay, give me an idea of something that you remote viewed, just so I get an idea of what in that test is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the six remote. I had never heard of remote viewing before, and so what they did is my first remote viewing was the Stanford Art Museum at the university, and I didn't know that, of course, but they took me into a windowless room, and we sat for an hour while someone I had never met had randomly pulled a envelope from a safe and went out and drove around for half an hour and then opened the envelope, and it told them to go to the art museum.
Okay, Joe, I am so sorry to do this. Hold that thought. We're at this longer break I told you about. So the piece of news, we'll come back and pick up right at this point. Joe Mcmonicle is my guest. It's going to be a hell of a night. Stay right there. 952-225-5278. All right, we are honored to have with us tonight Joe Mcmonicle. He is regarded really as the best remote viewer in the United States, maybe the world. So this is serious stuff. Now, we were right in the middle of talking about a very early test, Joe, in which they had you, I think you said, in a museum, and then there was a guy who had an envelope that had something in it.
He would pull this envelope out of the safe. He'd choose it using a random number generator. He'd drive around in traffic for half an hour and then open the envelope, and it would tell him where to go, what his randomly chosen target site was. In the meanwhile, they would take me up to a windowless room on the third floor of the physics building at SRI, and I was up there with Russell Tarr on this first target, and we got settled, and at a specific time, he pulled a picture of the person out of a folder and asked me if I'd ever met him before, and I said no. It was somebody I'd never seen before, and he asked me to describe where he was, and I said, how do I do that? And he said, well, just tell me where he is, and so I just let my imagination run crazy and basically drew the front of the building and described it as a place of art and whatnot.
Okay, so hit. Obviously, you just described the impossible virtually.
Right, and I was as surprised as everybody else when we drove over there to see what my target was.
So this isn't like picking 1 out of 4, I'll take 3, and maybe this is describing in detail where somebody in a secret envelope has gone, a target.
Right. And they had approximately 50 to 75 locations in the San Francisco Bay Area, all within an hour's drive of the radio physics lab at SRI.
So that was one test, Joe. That was one test, right?
Right.
And you're saying you passed 6?
6 of those, yeah.
Wow.
Over a week's period. And described 4 of them about as accurately as you could. Certainly well enough that they could select them randomly out of the pile of target possibilities and say that's exactly where they went using just my remote viewing.
That's incredible. No wonder they grabbed you.
Well, it surprised me as much as it does anyone else, and I have to admit that when I got back, we began a year of training, and I had 24 straight failures.
Oh. All right. Now, to be clear, was this already the CIA Stargate program? Is that what you were in at that point?
No. To be clear, it was a psychic. It was a 3-year test and analysis of the use of psychics to collect intelligence, because we knew that the Soviet Union and the Chinese were using psychics, so we had no idea how good they were, and we certainly couldn't get someone inside their unit. So the way you deal with that is you train people to do somewhat similar work, and you target yourself, and then you have the results independently analyzed.
At that that point, Joe, who was sponsoring it, if not the CIA?
The U.S. Army.
U.S. Army, okay.
Yeah, the U.S. Army intelligence was sponsoring it under INSCOM.
Okay. So where from there? I mean, you worked for the Army for a while, I guess, after the...
Well, actually, we never got past the third month of training in our 3-year project.
Huh?
And we had the Iran-Tehran problem.
Oh, yes.
They took over the embassy. And the problem they had is that the embassy was taken over on a Sunday, so they had no idea who was a hostage and who wasn't. And unless you can identify the hostages, they can disappear somebody, and you wouldn't be able to know if they had or they hadn't. And so they had no way of identifying the hostages other than to come to us and try us out. And it turned out that we did a better than respectable job of identifying the hostages. So our project went straight from a 3-month introduction to a full-blown collection project.
So you were trying to identify, when you say identify the hostages, do you mean not individually, but where they were, or what?
No, individually.
Oh, my.
A couple of us were taken into a room, and they had approximately 500 photos on a table. And they asked us to go through the photos and tell them who was absolutely a hostage and who wasn't. And we were able to identify the hostages that way.
So you did, wow. That's extremely impressive. All right. So, but you said something about not continuing on, or...
Yeah, what it was, initially it was a 3-year study project to determine the effectiveness of the Soviet Union and Chinese psychics. And the problem with that is the study project disappeared because we suddenly found ourselves using it operationally, and you can't maintain an operational unit under study unit protocols. So we became a fully operational psychic unit and suddenly got lots of targets dumped on us. They were predominantly problems that had been other agency had worked on for in some cases over a year and had been fully unsuccessful in getting anywhere with them. So the uniqueness of our unit was that while we only had about a 30% success rate, our 30% was on targets that had otherwise been totally undoable. In other words, no other agency had been successful in solving the problems.
Right, now, people need to understand 30% is astronomically high because we're talking about, for example, remote viewing where, let's say, they want to know where is bomb number so-and-so, nuclear weapon so-and-so, and when he says 30%, he means 30% of the time they correctly identified where nuclear weapon so-and-so was. People need to understand how incredible it really is.
I can even give an example. There was a Russian bomber had disappeared over Central Africa, and no one could find it for over a year, and that was carrying nukes and other things. And you can imagine everybody was looking for it, every intelligence agency in the world and every terrorist organization.
Sure.
And nobody could find it for over a year, and they brought it to 3 of the units that had used psychics, and to include us, there were 2 other units that had played with the remote viewing for a while, and they even took it to them as well. And all 3 units produced what I would call interlocking circles on a map, and we were able to locate the bomber in a matter of literally days, if not hours.
All right, don't say anything classified. You're getting.
No, I'm not.
And when you say nuclear weapons and other things, that's even ominous to me.
Well, yeah, it could sound ominous, I suppose.
No, it's like that's already as bad as it could be. I I guess there could be things worse. Anyway, you actually located that.
I didn't personally, but one of our other remote viewers did, and did a very good job at it, I would add. In fact, this particular mission was briefed by President Carter, and as a result, we wound up having the name of the project changed.
And it became what?
It went from Grill Flame to Center Lane.
Okay. All right. Somewhere down line, it did become Stargate for the CIA, didn't it?
That's correct. Every time managerial authority was altered or changed, they changed the name of the project because they couldn't have an Army project name on a DIA project, and they couldn't have a DIA name on a CIA project, that sort of thing.
I was honored to have interviewed in earlier years Robert Monroe, the Monroe Institute, and I guess you went to the Monroe Institute, correct?
That's correct, yes. The Army sent me here, in fact, on a couple of occasions, and I ended up working with Bob on long weekends for approximately 14 months in his lab, with the idea that he would teach me to control my out-of-body events, which were occurring spontaneously since my near-death experience in 1970. We also expected him to help me reduce some of the problems I was having with my cool down prior to remote viewing, because my cool down periods are becoming extensive as a result of so much remote viewing.
What do you mean cool down periods?
Before I do a remote viewing, I have to clear my head from the previous remote viewing.
Right.
And that takes some doing. And as a result of being the only viewer left in the project for almost a 2-year period, that cool down period was becoming more and more extensive because I was having to do so many remote viewings.
So what is that like? I mean, do you end up with severe headaches? Are you fatigued totally?
You can. It's very stressful because you may be jumping from a kidnap victim straight into a torture victim, straight into a stolen nuclear weapon or something. And so it's not like each remote viewing is not that important. They were all critical. And going from one to the next, they expect you to just jump from one to the next. And
I see.
That period of time in between when you try to empty your mind and prepare for the next remote viewing becomes critical to the success. And I was becoming very stressed out about that.
Okay, you said two things that I can't let pass. One, near-death experience, and the other, out-of-body experiences. Both are fascinating things for me, and so really, I can't just let them roll by. What happened near death?
In 1970, I had a near-death experience, which was actually, to cut to the chase, I was sitting in a restaurant having a before-dinner drink and went into convulsions. I got very, very ill feeling, and I didn't want to be projectile vomiting or something in a restaurant, so I excused myself, and I just made the front door and collapsed on the sidewalk. And what I didn't know is that I had gone into convulsions and swallowed my tongue. And when you swallow your tongue, you can't breathe.
Right.
So it's only a matter of time until your heart stops. And I was in Austria when this occurred. I was in Braunau, Austria, right across the Elbe River from Germany. And my friend came out with my wife, and he tried to revive me and couldn't, so they put me in a car and drove me 38 kilometers to the hospital in Passau, Germany.
Right.
And had to cross a border checkpoint to do that. And that took some time, so I was delivered DOA to the hospital or the emergency room in Germany, and had been DOA probably
really dead?
I was very dead, according to the doctor anyway. I became comatose when they get a heartbeat, and they honestly didn't think I would come out of the coma.
And if you did, probably with brain damage.
Yeah, and I came out of the coma, and it was less than 24 hours later, and when I came out of the coma, I started telling the German patient in the room with me that I started speaking to him in broken German and English. You know, I said, "You can't die. God's a white light, and everything's going to be fine."
Wow.
And he freaked out, and the doctor came in and sedated me again. So,
do you really believe that, Joseph, that you cannot die? That is to say, cease to exist totally. That there is something on the other side. No question about it in your mind.
there's no question in my mind. I know it's argumentative for a lot of people. You know, one of my best friend, he's almost a brother to me, Dr. Edwin May, is a materialist, and he thinks that that's crazy. And we talk about it sometimes, but that's what I believe. And I can't change my mind because the experiences I had.
I just want to ask you about it.
Yeah.
You were gone a long time, so I am exceptionally curious about your near death. It really should be called death. You were on the other side. What happened?
Well, it was a classic near-death experience. I mean, I found myself out of body watching everything, and when I followed the car and my body to the emergency room, and when they got there, I watched them cart me in and throw me on the table and cut my clothing off and stick things in my body and whatnot. And I floated up near the ceiling, and I felt heat on the back of my neck, and I thought, oh, I must be up against that, that really bright light they have in the ceilings of emergency rooms.
Right.
And so I turned around to look at it and found myself falling through a tunnel, and the tunnel walls are made up of people. And I closed my eyes to shut them out and reviewed my whole life, basically in an instant, and popped out the end of the tunnel and was enveloped in a very intense white light.
Was it, when you were in review, was it judgmental?
Only judgmental in the sense that I judged myself. There was no one looking over my shoulder. There was no God being there. There was no one there helping. It was just me dealing with the things that
you had done, and that's pretty hard. That can be very harsh.
That's the hardest. Believe me, that's the hardest kind of judgment.
I believe you.
And at the end of that, you pop out of the end of the tunnel, and you're enveloped in this completely comforting and loving white light, which at the time I had the need to say that's what God is, only because I had no basis for ever having experienced it before.
I was going to say it's obvious you passed the test,
Well, something passed because I decided I was going to stay, and it decided I wasn't. And I was told in my mind that I had to go back. And I said, no, I'm staying right here. I'm perfectly fine right here. And there was sort of a snap, like a snap of the fingers. And I sat up, and I was under this sheet in this room with this other patient. And that's when I told him that, God's a white light, you can't die, everything's going to be fine. And then they sedated me again, I think because they thought I was suffering from brain damage. I woke up the next day on a gurney with being put in the back of a limo with the windows taped up with tinfoil. And they took me to Munich and put me in a rest home, in the wing of a rest home they had leased, I guess.
Wow.
And I spent almost 2 weeks there. They didn't have the MRI machines and all that back in 1970, so I had to undergo a lot of testing to ensure that my brain cells weren't all dead.
All right, hold it right there. from my perspective, the death experience that Joe just described is, I at another time, Joe, I would have done a whole show on that. That is so impressive. You were dead, period, and you were dead for many minutes. So what you have to say about that, I think, is interesting, not just to me, but everybody out there.
Yeah, I imagine it would be. It was interesting to me.
I'm sure it was. And then somehow, after that, I guess you began to have out-of-body experiences.
Yeah, I started from that point on, after they, of course, kept me for a number of weeks to determine my stability. And once that was determined, they kept me in the Munich area for a while, but actually another 7 years they kept me overseas. But a lot of things changed for me. I stopped doing a lot of things that I had done before. I became a much milder, gentler person. And
was it because of the review?
It was partly that, and it was partly the fact that I came to understand that my actions had tremendous effects on not only myself, but on the people that cared about me a great deal that I might not even know I was affecting.
Got it.
And that also it had great effect on the kinds of reciprocal action that I got to enjoy as a result of my own action. In other words, I viewed myself from that point on as sort of being a farmer that plants seeds all the time, that grow fruit, and the fruit I always get to harvest myself. The problem is if you're unconscious and totally unaware, and you're planting seeds, you may be planting them in anger, and that produces a negative or deconstructive fruit that you get to enjoy. And
all right. Briefly,
so I wanted to change everything.
I get it. Briefly, with respect to OBEs, again, we could do a whole show on that, and I have done whole shows on it. It is, I am told, possible to leave your body. I've heard the story of the silver cord that attaches you back to your body, and that if anything goes wrong, you come snapping back to your body, and all is well. So it's very safe, they say.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. I have been out of body as a problem solver. In other words, I've had surgeries that ended up being extremely uncomfortable or very painful, and as a result, I've chosen to leave my body during the recovery rather than be in it. And during those periods of time, I've gone about as far out as you can possibly go in terms of stretching that, whatever that cord is, and far enough to forget who you are and what you're doing. And in every case, I've suddenly come to a stop and tried to remember what it was that I was remembering, and in doing so have been gradually pulled back faster and faster until I wound up back in my own body. So,
and that is where we will leave Art and his guest for tonight. Come on back tomorrow to pick up part 2. Till then, like, share, and subscribe, be kind to one another, and always release the Kraken as we march along this overnight and every overnight here from day 1. Have a great night's sleep. We'll see you tomorrow.